We're going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. If you'd please join me in a moment of silent prayer or reflection. Thank you. Terry, if you'd please do roll call.
Kathy Cox.
Here.
Alan Ward.
Here.
John Maston.
Here.
Pat Rooney.
Here.
Nicole Cohen.
Here. If you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do I have a motion to call for a budget hearing?
I'll move it. Second.
Terry?
Pat Rooney.
Yes.
Alan Ward.
Yes.
Kathy Cox.
Yes.
John Maston.
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Turn it over to Mr. Murray.
Madam President, members of the board, the district must revise the 2017-18 expenditure budget no later than November 1st, 2017. A hearing notification was posted on the Arizona Department of Education website on the 6th of October 2017. Senate Bill 1522 provides for supplemental teacher pay for the 2017-18 school year. Arizona school districts shall increase the salary of each teacher who taught at an Arizona district or charter school during 2016-17 and will teach at an Arizona school district or charter school during the 17-18 school year by 1.06% based on their 2016-17 salary, including stipends and classroom site funds. This shall be in addition to other salary increases that the teacher would have otherwise received during the 2017-18 school year. Districts have been instructed that only teachers paid through Function Code 1000 are eligible to receive the 1.06% increase. Function 1000 includes the activities dealing directly with the interaction between teachers and students. Certified staff who are identified in the USFR as offering support services in Function 2000 or any other function, including attendance, guidance, health, psychological, speech and audiology, OTPT, academic coach, and teachers on assignment, unfortunately, are not eligible for the 1.06% increase as defined by the state and Auditor General's office. Funding shall cover a 1.06% salary increase plus the amount needed to pay the employer share of related increases to the Arizona State Retirement System. The Arizona Department of Education shall add the computed cost for the 1.06% increase plus allowable employer benefit increases to the base support level that otherwise would be computed for the 2017-18 school year. Monies that a school district receives from the 1.06% increase and related benefits shall be included in the school district's general budget limit. Budget copies are kept on file at the district business office and in the governing board minutes and are made available to the public upon request. Summary pages will be provided to the governing board as background for the budget hearing. So because I have back-to-back presentations, is it okay if I sit here and present? If not, I'll go over there and take everything.
That's fine.
All right.
Well, we can call for discussion afterwards. We've already made a motion and a second, so we're in discussion.
This presentation is fairly short. The revision, as talked about and mentioned in the informational pamphlet, just pertains to the 1.06% teacher salary increase, which is found in the budget document on page 2 of 8 down in the lower right-hand corner. The screenshot is there up on the screen for others to view, as well as worksheet C, which helps build the actual expenditure budget. This section is very small, like I mentioned. if you look at the annual financial report, which was just completed, on the AFR, it actually specifies certified teachers within that function 1,000 category. That dollar amount is included there on line 4, where it says total 2017 eligible teacher salaries. So if you calculate those and add them up, it comes to that 10 million figure you see. Then when you take that $10 million figure, it'll actually compute and calculates to line 5, which is just before that red arrow, just above it. So the actual increase of 1.06 based on 2016-17 total expenditures in function 1,000. That $10 million figure, the 1.06% is 108,817 that you see up on the screen. So then, as mentioned in the information that I provided, the employer's share of the retirement contributions, if you would take that 108,000 and multiply it by 11.5%, which is the employer share for Arizona retirement, it comes out to that $12,000 figure you see up on the screen. And then on line 7, you take 7.65%, which is the employer share of FICA, against that 108,000. And you come up with the $8,000 figure you see there on the screen for a total of $129,655, which is available for that 1.06% teacher salary increase, which will then be distributed to all eligible teachers in December, as the email stated, the previous email that I sent out to teachers. So during the adopted stage of the budget, which was put together in the summertime, there was still information that was floating around as to who would be eligible and who would not. So during the budget preparation process and the adoption process, we anticipated, I budgeted a little bit high for the eligible teachers just so I can make sure we capture the dollar amounts needed in that adopted budget, knowing that we would have a revision taking place. So now that we have the final figures as populated on the annual financial report, that dollar amount came out to be about $9,000 less than what we budgeted for. Because we had, if you look at the top of the page, top of the screen, right here, these numbers were adjusted. Originally we had about 240 there in the adopted budget. I think it might have the original. I think it was 246 if I remember right. But now based on actual data, knowing that we had, I believe it was 5 teachers who taught at an Arizona district or charter elsewhere. We included them in this figure as well, which is what we are supposed to do by law and by statute. So the actual total of eligible teachers, the head count is 216. The full-time equivalent is 215 because we actually have 2 teachers who are funded at half-time out of function 1,000. So 2 halves make a whole, so it's reduced by that number. So 215 full-time eligible, but 216 teachers are eligible for this 1.06%. And then again, it's based on the 16-17 total salary that you received. So again, going back to adopted budget versus revised budget, the difference between the 246 number and the 216 that we had to revise to calculated out to be a $9,000 decrease, almost $10,000 decrease. So to balance the budget, I revised on page 2 out of the 6600 object code, which is supplies. I took $9,896 out of the supplies area in order to balance the budget. And currently supplies are just over $1 million, or they're in the $1 million range, $1.7 million currently budgeted for complete district supplies right now currently. So that is the revision of the 1.06. Again, it was literally just a corner of one page of an 8-page budget, expenditure budget that had to be revised.
So my, according to the agenda item, it states that it shall include a teacher's salary, including stipends and classroom site fund. So teachers who get stipends will be getting more. It's not just based on the salary.
Correct.
It's
Total compensation, salary, stipends, 301 monies.
right.
Yep, everything. It's 1.6% of their full, of their full 17 salary, and that's another reason why we were off somewhat. I mean, to be off only $9,000 in the summertime and not having our expenditures fully completed at that time, we had to just kind of forecast out where we were going to be. I think we were pretty close.
Elementary teachers get stipends. Very few elementary teachers get stipends.
Correct.
And so the teachers at the high school who do get stipends, I just think it should be pointed out. It's the law, and that's how it's to be done. That's how it's to be done. But I think it needs to be brought out. I think it needs to be made known.
Correct. And that's why it was in the information packet, and clearly it's salaries, total salary.
This is just a question, because this is confusing to me. Because most of the places where I've worked, stipends were not considered part of your base salary. So next year, this teacher isn't getting a stipend. Is there adjustment made to this?
There will be next year. It's the way the law is currently stated is that total compensation out of function code 1000 will receive that 1.06% increase. So whatever that dollar amount comes out to be, from base salary to stipends to 301 pay, the 1.06% will be calculated based on that bottom line June 30th figure that a teacher had in total compensation at that point.
So next year, if they didn't have a stipend, they'd lose the stipend and they'd lose the 0.106 of the stipend.
Correct. Whatever their total compensation will be at the end of this year, as the law is currently in place, then it would be 1.06% based on the 17-18 total compensation.
Just wanted to put it in my mind.
And individuals who were teachers last year but then moved into a different position this year are also not eligible. Just as teachers, individuals who were not teachers and paid in function code 1000 last year, who are now doing so this year, are not eligible. So it had to be 16-17 and continuing on in the 17-18 school year.
Any other questions? Call for the vote, Terry.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Baskin,
Yes.
Cole Cohen,
Yes.
Alan Ward,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Okay, action item 1.6, we're going to call for a bond hearing for the 2017-18 bond fund report. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved. Second.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Murray again.
Madam President, members of the board, according to Arizona Revised Statute 15-491K, the district is required to hold a hearing annually between September 1st and October 31st until bond proceeds are spent, at which time an update of the progress of capital improvements financed through bonding is discussed, and at which time the public is permitted an opportunity to comment. The bond report gives a summary of the bond projects and the combined expenditures to date. So again, there's the Arizona Revised Statute as mentioned, 15-491K, just stating that we need to hold this hearing annually so that public can have an opportunity to comment during at this time. You'll recall several months ago I proposed this type of a template so that we can bring this to a meeting such as this to clearly show, based on the Citizens for Havasu Schools breakdown, the pamphlet that was issued and made available to the public, where it actually shows the budgeted amounts for certain projects broken down to individual sites within the district. So I'm going to continue to use this template and move forward with, can we go ahead and go to that Excel spreadsheet? So this is a screenshot of it, and here's the more current real-time version of it. And I'm going to probably have to scroll down. Unless, would you like to scroll down as well? Is that okay? Let's start back at the top, though. Sorry. I'll go through it quickly, but not that. So maintenance was the first item. If you'll, this pretty much mirrors the Havasu Citizens for Havasu Schools pamphlet. It's almost identical, with the exception of a few additional columns that I proposed several months ago regarding not only bond expenditures, but then also to show where the School Facilities Board may have also contributed in this process to hopefully help offset some of those bond expenditures. So you'll see there in maintenance, this first section of maintenance, we have HVAC. Currently our priority, especially now that it's getting cooler, all of our projects we're trying to push through the School Facilities Board. They're the source in which they provide these capital funds so that we don't have to exhaust bond funds and local funds. We're actually trying to acquire and capture state money to make improvements within our schools. And we're heavily relying on them right now with our HVAC systems. And you can see there, just to date, based on the beginning of the school year, we have some generous contributions, and actually today I received 2 emails from the School Facilities Board in which they've also authorized funding of 2 air conditioning units at Starline and 1 over at the high school. So that's not included on this, but it will be added there as the work is completed and we actually issue or receive monies for that. So you'll see in Thunderbolt there's about $4,000 there contributed towards the HVAC systems. There's some tabs along the bottom which actually populate this summary page, which break it down by purchase order, and a little bit of just very basic detail as to what happened. So a lot of the monies that you're seeing there are unit replacements as well as engineering fees that the School Facilities Board now requires our contractors to have in place before actually installing equipment. So part of this process is the School Facilities Board will authorize an engineering fee, an engineering assessment, and then once that goes through and they accept that assessment, then they make the determination as to whether or not they're going to replace the unit. So there's an engineering charge, which is anywhere from in the low thousands to $2,000 range, just in engineering alone. And then at that point, they determine whether or not, like I mentioned, they're going to fund the unit itself or the repairs for that particular unit. So that's included in that total that you see. You can go ahead and go down. Now, maintenance is kind of, right now we're heavily relying on SFB, like I said, for HVAC. We do have some plumbing expenditures there. Painting, we can stop right there for a second because this is kind of actually a really bright spot, not kind of. You'll see at the high school there we have budgeted about $764,000 in the actual bond that went out to the public through the Citizens for Havasu Schools pamphlet. You'll see there that the SFB just recently approved, well, this isn't recent, but this is something to kind of pave the way for the good news. They approved an assessment of the exterior structure of the high school. So they came in, they authorized an assessment to take place to see if the weatherization of the high school was in fact adequate, or if there was some sealing issues that they needed to address, sealing by way of moisture coming into the walls. Based upon that assessment, they authorized us to go out and bid for a bid to actually have an entire weatherization take place at the high school. That's painting, basically, but it's a little bit more than that because we're also talking about sealing those outer walls. Recently, we were approved to be fully funded for that project. Now, you'll recall in earlier discussions, this was critical for our future success and expectations for our athletic fields. So this provides more of a path to take care of what we need to do at the athletic fields. We're still in need to look at some things and look at all expenditures. We're definitely not rolling in the money for athletic fields, but we have more of a clear path to reach our goal. That came in the form of $400 and some thousand for the gym alone. So that $700,000, that $764,000 figure would cover the gym and maybe a room or two, linear foot or two of some of the other buildings. The remaining portion of that award was in the tune of about $1.2 million. So total, it was right around $1.7 million in repairs and weatherization to the high school, which is $1 million over what we actually budgeted for in the first place. So
That was approved by the FSD?
that was approved by the SFD. So that is a
Can we
huge.
clap on that?
I would say
That's exciting stuff.
So that is a bright spot on the expenditures, even though that's going to be fully in the SFD column. That will allow us to take some of those budget dollars and reallocate them to the athletics. So you go ahead, Terry. Asphalt, still working on some things, and in my next slide on the PowerPoint, my final slide, it'll kind of summarize what we have going on here. Keep going down to technology, if you would, please. There we go. You can keep going. We do have quite a bit of technology that has come into our district over the last several months. So we're going to start seeing it right about, keep going just a little bit more. We did have emergency radios that were funded through the bond. This is all in progress. We'll see that on the last slide right here. Just up a little bit. So here's where we have made improvements to our computer labs, our peripherals in our buildings. That includes document cameras, those instructional aids and supports that are technology related. So that's included in that peripheral section. You can go ahead and go down a little bit. I believe that's pretty much it. Transportation, and I'll hit this on the last slide. So let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint so we can keep moving along, and if there's questions, we can go back to it. Right there. Thank you, Terry. So in progress, we have maintenance, transportation technology, athletic fields. There were the four main parts of the bond. So as we have these projects that are currently in place, maintenance, we are currently assessing our flooring situation. We're trying to develop the scope of work and get that ready for the bidding process so that we can actually go out and go out for bids so that we can have a plan in place as to which rooms will be addressed first. You can imagine the logistics behind that. There's a lot of desks and chairs and a lot of things to move. There's people in place in the schools for the majority of the school year, so there's a lot behind that. But that is in the works. The painting and weatherization project, I referred to that. Transportation, we do have 2 buses on order, 2 activity buses on order, and 1 route bus on order. They're due to arrive around February-ish. Maintenance fleet is currently in the works. We're hoping to have that brought before the board in November regarding maintenance vehicles and equipment that's needed in maintenance. So we're hoping, like I said, to have that before the board next month. Technology is still underway. They're working here in this district building right now. Hopefully the technology won't go out on us soon. They're over here in our neck of the woods. So the fiber backbone, servers, peripherals, computer monitors, all of those things are still ongoing and in progress. Athletic fields, as I mentioned, we're in the design phase. With that painting project, that relief there, we're able to address our athletic fields, hopefully a little bit more true to what we were originally hoping to do. Tomorrow, there's a general contractor walkthrough at the high school, so I will be up there with our maintenance people and hopefully some general contractors who are going to respond to this request for quotations to become a general contractor for our athletic field project. So tomorrow we'll give them an opportunity to actually have boots on the ground and walk the fields and see kind of what we're looking at and hoping for. Once that contractor is on board, they'll work very closely with our architect and the district office so that we can continue to move forward, and we're still optimistic of having a May completion time for graduation.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think a lot of people appreciate that your formatting follows, so it makes it really easy. What was sold in the bond, the format, the way it looks, and the way you're reporting it. And kudos to John for working that SFB because that's incredible. So I appreciate the update. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Go ahead. Oh.
I have a question. On the last meeting, we were talking about the 46 bathroom stalls, and whether or not that could be addressed, or is that going to be discussed?
That's a great question, because that's definitely something that we should follow up with the public. We are in the process of trying to pin down a time and a date to meet with the city to actually walk through our plans and to see if there's any way that we can receive some type of variance to that. So that is in the works. After tomorrow's meeting and walkthrough, we might even have the contractor. We're hoping to get that solidified here within the next couple weeks. If we can't get a meeting before that, then we're going to bring the contractor in that conversation as well. But that is definitely after tomorrow's meeting, priority 2.
So maybe the contractors that are going to do the walkthrough might have examples of where they've been able to do variances of
Correct.
construction.
And we're also trying to gathering that information through the architect so that we can give examples of other school sites who do not have 46 bathrooms. So we're trying to give them some like-for-like comparisons in hopes that they will be kind to us, which would then provide a lot of relief to that facility, that restroom and concession stand facility.
Yes. Are there any other questions?
Mike, you will ask them a question about those lights, won't you?
Yes.
And just because we are required by law to have an annual meeting, we'll be having monthly updates on how we're working through our bond. So some form or fashion, but with that format. So if there's no other questions, I'll call for the vote.
Doug Rooney,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
Yeah.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Baston,
Yes.
Paul Cullen.
Yes. Do we have any calls to public?
No, we do not.
All right, I know we're going to move into recognition of visitors, but she's not a visitor. Our superintendent, Mrs. Asire, is going to update us on the assessment and accountability scores.
You technology.
Yes, yes it is.
I'm not going to show up there. I'm probably going to go back to my seat. Because I was counting on talking to the board and looking at the screen. It's trying. Any ideas, Monica?
Sometimes it takes a minute to cool
It will
down.
like cool down for a minute or two, and then it should go back on.
Turn all the way.
All right, start it again.
Yeah.
Okay, you all can see that, sorry. It's off, it's better. If it comes out, that'll be great. Well, excuse my back here for a little bit. I'm actually going to review a little bit for the board, a presentation that I gave earlier in the year on the A through F accountability, and then go into our actual data in relation to the AZ merit, and then go through the A through F grades for the district. So when we received this information earlier in the year on the A through F school letter grade formula, we didn't have a lot of information because oh, there it goes. Great. We didn't have a lot of information because the A through F grades formulas were not necessarily all lined out. But we did know that, if you go back here, that for K through 8, the recommendation of the ad hoc committee, which was ultimately adopted by the state board, was that the letter grades would be based on, for K through 8, on proficiency, on growth, on English language learner growth, and then 10% on acceleration and readiness factors. And I'll talk about those a little bit as we go through. But essentially, 90% of the 100% grade was based on the AZ merit, and then English learners a Zella assessment, so one assessment. So you can see the percentages noted there. For the high schools, it was a little bit different in that the, I am not doing that. Proficiency was actually 50%, or excuse me, 30% on the high schools, and then growth was only 20%. For 50% of the high schools, grade was based on the AZ merit. 10% on English learner assessment for a total of 60%. And then the other two major indicators were college and career readiness and graduation rates. And so when you look at the chart for this, you can see that a much smaller part was AZ merit, and much more of the system was balanced based on that. So the model was 0 to 100 points, and in order for a school to be able to count an indicator, they had to have at least 20 students within that subgroup or that characteristic. Go through here really quickly. Again, on student growth, this was 25% of the K-8, 10% of the 9-12. On student growth to target was 25% of K-8 and 10% of 9-12. And these two indicators were taking a student and looking at, were they making progress toward proficiency, and then were they making progress compared to their peers? So that was that growth thing. I think it's got an automatic thing on there to speed me up. I bet someone went in and programmed that for me. So for English language learners, in our district, we only have one site that has a significant subgroup of English language learners. So for most of our schools, they were based on a 90-point scale rather than a 100-point scale. In K-8, acceleration was end-of-course math testing. So that one was available for our middle school because we do have a lot of students who take Algebra 1 at the middle school. And then at our elementary schools, if they had decreased from the previous year the number of students who were minimally proficient. So were they making progress on third graders, first time taking the AZ merit, were they actually proficient? And then subgroup improvement. This was an area where we didn't realize initially, but we were heavily penalized because we do not have significant subgroups. So we couldn't even earn the points in that category because we didn't have subgroups with which to earn 2 points per subgroup. Special ed inclusion was based on how many of our students are included in classrooms. And then chronic absenteeism is whether the total number of students who were absent for at least 10% of the year had reduced from the previous year. Go right through these. On the subgroups that could be included if they were a minority of the population, you can see those here are white, African American, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, etc. English learners, special education, free and reduced lunch students, and gender was ultimately removed from this. I mentioned chronic absenteeism. So for the 9th through 12th grade college and career readiness, there was 20% of their score was based on that, and graduation rate. On the college and career ready indicators, those were self-reported data. And so one of the interesting pieces of this is that we were on the honor system to report our data, and our high school was very honest in reporting our data. This was our first year of going through it. And there were some areas where we have to question about other schools, because there were schools within our community and within our county that, for example, reported that all of their students had met the AZ Regent requirements, which was highly unlikely. So, anyway, so college and career readiness indicators, there were several indicators that they needed to enter data in, and they could score points for that data. And then there was a list that was adopted on the rubric credentials that would be certified, and then graduation rate. And they could earn up to 10 points on graduation rate based on how long it took students to graduate and what percentage of graduates. So looking at all of these indicators, one of the big things that we needed to talk about was our AZ merit results, because that was the primary indicator for which our grades were assigned. Many of you have seen this chart already. This shows a 3-year progression on our grades 3 through 11. And the reason we include the 3-year is that spring of 2015 was the first year of AZ merit administration. It is important to note that when we look across at scores, that not only have the students changed each year at grade level, but also the assessment has changed each year. And so as it is modified, so for example, the first year they could use paper and pencil, but in the second year they couldn't. So those are things that are affecting our test results. In addition, looking at the middle school in grade 8 in 2015, all of our 8th grade students took both tests, the Algebra 1 and the 8th grade test. Starting in 2016, those groups were separated out. So 8th graders in Algebra 1 took Algebra 1, those 8th graders that were in general 8th grade math took that test as well. And so we can see for English language arts, as you're looking at that data, that over time, looking at the 3rd grade, for example, and I'll point this way for the board, 3rd graders in 2015 were 4th graders in 2016, and then were 5th graders in 2017. And so while it's not a pure cohort, you can see that students are showing a little bit of growth over time. Whereas when you're talking about the 3rd graders year to year, what you're evaluating on your assessment results at that point in time is how consistently are the teachers teaching the standard and students mastering the standards. So different groups of students are consistently scoring around 52% at the 3rd grade level, which would indicate that consistency of curriculum. In mathematics, we have the scores as well. And again, the same trend data. If you look across, it's the consistency of the curriculum. If you look in cohort group, and so as we're progressing in 3rd grade, and remember these were also paper pencil, and then to 4th grade, and then to 5th grade, how are our students scoring in terms of consistency? And as you look at different years and progress them forward, you can see different levels of either growth or decline in the results. So one of the issues that came out in the A through F grades was that we are not looking only at the percent proficient, but also are students making growth from year to year. So as a 4th grader to 5th grade, have they shown growth in their scores? From 5th grade to 6th grade, have they shown growth in their scores? So those are the 2 areas of measurement. Also, I'd like to point out the 8th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade mathematics results, and this is something that we've been talking about as a middle school community for the last year. In 8th grade, in 2015, Algebra 1, we tested 84 students, and 99% of them scored proficient or higher. As you look across for Algebra 1, 8th grade, 80 students in the following year, and then 93 students the following year, and we're scoring at 96% proficient there. Our 8th graders, 39% was all of those students added to them. So you see that the number is reduced down by that 80 to 90 kids. And looking at our actual percentage of students who are in advanced mathematics, that's one of the bright spots for middle school, is that we have basically a fourth of our students, a little over a fourth of our students are actually in advanced mathematics and scoring very well in that. Unfortunately, as we progress through the high school, our students are not doing as well in mathematics as they should be. This is an area that we've been looking at as a district pretty much since the beginning of last year. When we look at our scores compared to the state of Arizona, and this is the elementary school, we can see that just based on percent passing for ELA, although the state line is embedded right here, it's that black line is the state line. For the most part, by grade levels, we vary. But when you look generally across at the percent passing ELA, in every grade level, we do exceed the state average for those students. The same is true for mathematics, and as you can see by looking at the mathematics chart, we did have some dips in mathematics at the elementary school, as well as some very high points. Again, those have been carefully analyzed in our comprehensive needs assessment this year. But generally, as a district, you look again, we are completely outperforming the state average in mathematics as well. The other interesting piece of this, just as a note, is when you look at, for example, the ELA, you'll notice that as a whole, fourth graders perform better than third graders and fifth graders perform less well. And you look in mathematics, that's just the opposite. Fourth graders perform less than third graders, and then they tend to go up in fifth grade. And some of that is just a reflection on the level of standards that they're being asked to master and the way that they're being assessed. When we look at 7th and 8th grade, then, compared to the state, in English language arts in 7th grade, we had basically, we're right on par with the percent passing in alignment with the state. And then in 7th grade. In 8th grade, we were a little bit underperforming the state in English language arts. And then looking in mathematics, again, slightly underperforming the state in 7th grade and dramatically underperforming the state in 8th grade, and that is with not including our algebra scores. And again, as we talked about our comprehensive needs assessment, what we determined at the 8th grade at Thunderbolt particularly was that we had a problem with standards alignment. What we were actually teaching was not the 8th grade standards. It was a curriculum that had been adopted several years ago in anticipation of preparing the 8th graders for high school algebra, but was not actually aligned to the Arizona standards. And so they are aligned this year.
But will our 8th graders be prepared to be successful in Algebra 1? There has to be some kind of an alignment from 8th grade to algebra.
And in fact, the 8th grade standards are preparing them for Algebra 1. And so what we notice is that when we look at the 8th grade math scores and then the 9th grade algebra scores, the students were not prepared for algebra. They weren't really much better in their algebra scores than they were in their 8th grade math scores. And so what we're anticipating is that this change in curriculum at the 8th grade level will also boost our high school algebra scores because those students will come in with a better skill set than they did previously. This is a chart that was prepared by the superintendent in Topak. I did not prepare this chart. And what it shows is by grade level, and he was looking to see how their charter schools compare to the Havasu District, Topak District, Kingman District, Mojave Valley, and Bullhead district-wide, and looking at them by grade level. And so this was interesting to me from the standpoint that he just looked at third grade language arts percent proficient and what was the range within our county for those, and then what was the average. And so when you look at these scores, you can see compared to the county and compared to some of the charter schools, depending on them, they are all over the place. Some are better at some levels, some are not. We tend to really perform at 5th grade in both content areas. Again, at 6th grade, our scores were higher than most of the other schools in the county. And even here in, as we look at 7th grade and 8th grade, you know, we're kind of right in that ballpark of where those 7th and 8th grade students are performing within our county. The interesting thing with the charter schools that I would like to note, and you'll notice on one of these, I think it's the math one, Bullhead just has an asterisk. In many of these cases, they have very small numbers of students. And so in the high school, I have included Telesis just as a comparison, but we're talking for most of those scores, there were between 20 and 50 student results for those scores. And so they could be skewed in either direction as a result. So this is mathematics at the elementary school. And again, third grade tends to score high. You can see the averages. Fourth grade, go back. There we go. And in fifth grade, again, Havasu, we tend to outperform fifth. Fourth was very high. Sixth, this is where Bullhead did not have enough students that tested in math. Seventh grade, we're right up top. Eighth grade, we're low here. But now here's our algebra results. And again, we are the highest performing in algebra at the middle school. It says ninth grade math because eighth grade algebra is the ninth grade math assessment, but this is the eighth grade results. And for our students here, we also have tested a larger percentage of our eighth graders than any of the other districts here.
May I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Ninth grade, Havasu, math, the 96% proficiency does not seem to correlate to the previous chart about how our ninth graders did on the previous chart.
Okay, so on this previous chart, we don't show the algebra scores. On this score here, we do. So here you'll see that the eighth graders scored 96%, but at high school, they only scored 26% in Algebra 1.
So it seems, I can't put the two together. The 90% here and the 26% there.
I'm sorry, that says ninth grade, but it's actually eighth grade algebra. They took the ninth grade test.
Oh,
Those are eighth graders in advanced math.
okay.
In the 96, the advanced math would not be taking the first year in ninth grade algebra because they already took it in eighth grade to be in a different class.
They would probably be in
It'd
geometry.
be in geometry.
Yeah. All right, looking at grades 9 through 11, I do want to point something else out here. I apologize, I missed it. There is at the bottom of the screen, it says overall percent proficient. Thunderbolt, there's a screen that the ADE has that shows the total proficiency for language arts and math combined for students. So for Thunderbolt, it was 32.2% total proficiency. That includes the special education students, that includes everything. For the state of Arizona, it is 35% as the average proficiency. I point that out because for the high school, we also looked to see what was the average proficiency for overall for English language arts and math combined was 32.2% for the high school, and for the state of Arizona, it is 33%. So looking at our high school data, again, in English language arts, we do as well as the state. In 9th and 10th, a little bit better. In 11th, a little bit under. As we look at mathematics, however, in Algebra 1, our Algebra 1 scores are not very good at the high school. Again, we feel this links back to the 8th grade math as well, so those students aren't necessarily coming in with the same set of skills. Geometry and Algebra 2, we do outperform the state here as well. So I did a chart based on the work that the superintendent and TOPOC did. I went and did some research. I didn't have time to do the elementary and add in our charters. But looking at our language arts at 9th, 10th, and 11th, and then the mathematics compared to the high schools near us, I did include Parker. It's not in our county, but we do have our actually closest high school here. So what you see here in 9th grade, ELA, our high school. In 10th grade, again, we're just under Telesis here, and again, those numbers are very small. But what was interesting to me is looking at the gap. Here, we're talking large numbers of points in percentages. Same thing was true when we get over to geometry. Now, this is combined. I couldn't find the separate number. I wanted to make sure I was comparing apples to apples when I did this chart. So everybody's is they're combined. If they had 8th graders, those are included in the average here. And so again, huge gap between the Algebra 1, and that's because of our 8th grade performance. Then when we get into geometry, there's a huge gap here, which is kind of interesting. And then looking at Algebra 2 again. But there's also a huge gap between Havasu and then the rest of the districts locally. So our high school is outperforming most of our local comparable high schools. Graduation rate. I have a note on graduation rate. I would have to ask Mr. Becker for this year, but I do know this graduation rate is based on 2016, and we were at 89%. And I believe for 2017, we are over 90%. Right at 90%. The state of Arizona average is 80, and I just looked up today to see the national graduation rate average is 81%. And so here is our A through F profile. This is based on the data that I shared at the beginning and a point system. So as you can see, our grades for our elementary schools were B's and C's, and we did have an A. And then we did receive a failing grade for Thunderbolt. Their score was 47% on that score chart, and they needed to have 49. And Lake Havasu received a C at 68%. The concern I have, and I've been criticized for making excuses for our grades here, and I am not making excuses. We have areas that we need to improve. But to have the grades based on an assessment where we're scoring at or just below the state average and then receive a C and an F did not make sense to me. In looking at the information, the way that this is calculated is for the high school, proficiency was 30%. They got 15 points for that. For growth, 20%, they got almost 13 points for that. We do not have enough English learners, so we didn't score anything there. We had an amazing graduation rate. They had 20%, and they got the full 20 points there. The college and career ready was the one that was self-reported, so we had 13 points there as well, and based on all of those indicators. And so they had a total of 61%, or 61 points, out of eligible 90, which gave them a 68% percentage for their grade, which earned them a C. And then they break out the proficiencies by grade level, etc. I do want to point out science, because we are providing science assessment, and that I have something to say about that at the end. Thunderbolt Middle School, here you can see that proficiency was 16 points out of 30. So we're similar to the high school, about half there, but then when we get to the growth points, it is only 19.5. Growth at the middle school, actually starting with 6th grade, students are now reading to learn rather than learning to read. They're also applying skills that they were to become capable at in the elementary school. And so we're talking about accelerating the length and difficulty of the assessment, and yet expecting to show growth from 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th, and 8th to 9th in their scores.
But growth is not part of the 9-12 formula.
It is not. Well, it is, but it's a very small part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Then on acceleration and readiness, we have 5% there. There's some detailed information in here. Part of that is because of the mathematics. And then there's a little bit there in relation to our subgroups, but again, we have the issue of not having enough subgroups, so we cannot earn the total 10 points there because we don't have the capability of doing so. We did get a couple of bonus points because our special education students are mainstreamed, and that earned us a total eligible points of 42.5 for a percent of 47. And I would like for you to note the science, 78% proficient on the science here. So looking at, again, an overall proficiency compared to the state average, but not even half the points. Well, yeah, just over half the points, like an add. All right, Jamaica Elementary, again, one of the areas here that you'll notice is the growth. They did have the opportunity to have a lot of growth, and they actually had acceleration and readiness points of 6, which was pretty good.
What do they mean by acceleration?
The acceleration and readiness is defined. For that would be chronic absentee rate, inclusion of students with disabilities in general education, and improved growth of subgroups. Also, that is the ELA students who are in grade 3 who are minimally proficient has gone down. They've increased their proficiency in 3rd grade. And that's where the elementary's got the advantage. I have no idea where I am.
Sorry.
That's okay. Sorry. It's probably more interesting to me.
Sorry.
Yeah. All right, in Smoke Tree, again, growth, huge growth. We see huge growth in the elementary schools because students are learning and they're perfecting their skills. Again, we had acceleration and readiness points at 6. If we'd had significant subgroups, we could have seen the growth there as well, and sped bonus points. Starline, they had a decent proficiency rate here, but they had a really high growth rate. So students showed a lot of growth at Starline, got 41 out of 50 points there. And then they had 10 acceleration readiness points. And my anticipation in looking, and I have not delved deep in that, I don't want to speak to it, but much of that would be from the 3rd grade growth. Oro Grande, 21 out of 30 on proficiency. Growth was a little bit lower at 33%. And again, the opportunity to earn the acceleration points, 6 points there. And so they ended up having a 70%, which gave them a letter grade of C. Yes?
We also need to remember that Starling has the gifted program.
Yes. They have an advantage in that respect as well.
Yeah.
Although on the other side, the gifted kids don't grow as much. And so there's a little bit of a balance back on that as well. Nautilus, another one of our schools that has some acceleration readiness that was a little higher than average for the rest of our schools. Again, a B grade there. And Havasupai, which is our highest growth school. They had an amazing amount of growth there, as well as EL proficiency. So this is our only school that does have an English language learner subgroup, and our English learners showed dramatic growth there as well. So, on Friday of last week, actually the week before the break, we received a guidance document from the state. And what this is telling us now is that these are going to be preliminary letter grades, even though initially we were told they would be our letter grade. That the letter grades are posted, but the final letter grades are going to be issued on a later date now. That there are some technical changes that they will be making. And I would like to point out here in this copy from the text that because of the ESSA Act, it's going to require revisions to the plan. They are going to be removing our science data from the proficiency measures. Because our science scores are very high, my anticipation will be that that will have some impact on our grades. Also, the college and career readiness indicators must include all seniors, not just graduating seniors, which is, I think, minimal impact there. And there hasn't been any real field validation. This is a new plan. They haven't had a chance to look and see what the bugs are, and therefore they are going to be offering some public comment. So if we want to go down and make public comment, we do have that opportunity. I may take advantage of that. I do want to share with the board that they also have a new technical advisory committee. So the technical advisory committee that made the first set of recommendations is defunct. They're putting together a new one. And over the next 3 months, they're going to be making some decisions about the A through F accountability plan. I received a letter. My stuff piled up here. I do want to share this again with the board that that Thunderbolt has been designated as a comprehensive school improvement and support school. That the criteria used to identify that was being in the lowest 5% of the state assessment, which is 13% proficient or lower. So Thunderbolt is not in the lowest 5% proficient. As you remember back on that slide, we're at 32.5% proficient. Schools that are 13%, which is a huge difference, are in the lowest 5%. However, it's and or received an F letter grade. In my mind, that is a perfect demonstration of the fact that these grades are a little bit skewed. And I probably should share with the board that I did make a public records request at ADE today. I would like to see the list of schools that were identified, what their percentages were for proficiency, and I do have a plan to go speak to the state board.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Is there a chance for the modification of the grades they're going to come out with that F might actually raise?
I don't know. My guess would be that if they take out the science, that the percent proficient isn't going to look any better because that's fairly high. However, if they reallocate how points are calculated, it could. In the meantime, we're going forward. And so based on looking at all of our data, the areas that we've talked about is focusing on phonics K through 3 because that piece of having students be able to read by 3rd grade is huge. We know they're going to be much more successful if they can do that. We've spent some time looking at our mathematics standards, grades 6 through 8, and our teachers and our principals have been working really diligently to make sure we have a great alignment on those standards. And then we also are going to be looking at our textbook adoption of grade 9 through 12 as a part of our recommendation. Those came out of the comprehensive needs analysis as well. We would continue to work with the comprehensive needs analysis and prioritization, I'll get it, prioritization. And also a critical piece of this is being able to recruit and retain quality teachers. So those are the 2 areas of focus that we've already got in our plan.
So if I understand the numbers in here correctly, if I had a school that last year would have been an A school, and their test scores went down a couple of percentage points, they wouldn't get any growth points at all?
That would be correct based on an individual student basis. And again, one of the issues that we have with the 6 through 8 or 7 through 8 school is they only have 1 year to demonstrate growth.
The reason why I ask that question is you can have an A-performing school this year that has no growth that becomes a failing school next year.
That could happen.
That's ludicrous in my book.
You have no idea.
So, and again, in fairness, I think looking at growth, that when this model was designed, it was believed that it would provide a more fair system so that schools, and I'll, if I could pick on Have a Soup Pie a little bit, we have students that are coming in there that are not performing very well, that are really showing huge growth because of the programs that they have in place. And at the elementary level, that is much more common. Where it becomes an issue, again, is at the 6 through 8. And so, I don't know. I have heard, again, that's hearsay completely, but there are a lot of K-8 models of schools within the state of Arizona, so that could be why they looked at a K-8 accountability model. But when you actually separate middle school or junior high school with 7th and 8th graders, they really look very different from elementary school.
Yes. Somebody behind you.
So I just think it's
I had heard that these tests, they're not tied to like the old Ames test. If you didn't pass, you didn't graduate. So I have heard that more at the higher levels of grades, the students have a more cavalier attitude when they take these tests because they know they're not going to be held accountable from a graduation standpoint. So I'd be curious as to how do our letter grades within the school compare to what the state test scores would be.
Letter grade meaning GPA.
Well, I mean, or GPA.
Oh,
okay,
GPA,
yeah, GPA. So, I mean, I would think that across the board it would be, especially at the higher levels, it'd be higher.
So that is correct, and there is no accountability, and in fact we are restricted from using these results for student grades. We're not allowed by law to use them, so we can't even say, if you get proficient on this test, your grade will get raised by a grade, let's say, to a C.
But conversely, students know that,
exactly.
So they can just
and
go in there.
Yes, so our scores do not compare to GPA in general.
Right.
And also on other tests where they are invested, they score much higher. So when students take, for example, the ACT, they're looking to get admittance, so their effort is so
Much greater. Right.
And then generally, if you look at the state trend, just as students get older, the content is more challenging, the assessment is more challenging, and student interest in performing well. And if you're elementary kids, they'll do anything for their teacher. So your teacher says, I need you guys to do really your best on this, they're all going to do it. In middle school, they might say something else. And I speak from having been a middle school principal for many years.
With the Ames test, and the students had to pass it to graduate. Each year, the high school scores got improved every single year until Denise is not here, but I seem to remember that they actually reached up to 90%. And I could be wrong. Scott, do you have any idea?
Very close to that.
I mean, it was really quite incredible. Yeah, and we started off like 78%, something like that, of the kids passed the aims, and then, you know, we kept putting things into place. And it's not that the kids are not getting education, they could care less. They're high school kids. Remember when you were in high school, you know, they don't care. And I hope that there's something. I'd hate to go back to having the graduation requirement again, but I don't know anything else to put in place.
Is there any reflection of the AZ merit on report cards or on
They don't even know their
the final transcripts?
No, not that I'm aware of. They don't get their scores on their exam, nor do
What I'm asking is basically, could there just be an information? You can't pass or fail them. But if a senior knows that their AZ merit score is going to be on their final transcript, you might influence them to put some effort forward.
Doesn't mean anything to the universities.
That's it, we have to get the universities to have it in a way
Look
for
at
it
it.
to care.
So,
But what's the point for it to matter? Like, if it really holds no value, what's the point of it? Do we have
Control.
to take the test, or
Money.
can we say no?
It's about
Because all
control
it's
and
doing
money.
is hurting the schools.
And actually, I think, so Mrs. Cohen is going to make some remarks about that also. But yes, so we have a accountability system that's based on federal funding. And so the state wants to receive federal funding, so they create the accountability system to please the federal funding. Then schools have to follow that system in order to receive state and federal funding. And what they've said is this assessment is going to be the criteria upon which we're going to give a grade. The state can determine that. It has to be a portion of it. And in fairness, I think they were trying to design a system that was more fair. It just was the first trial, and they learned that, in fact, didn't work. But the idea that we give an assessment that is supposed to show students proficiency of standards that they're required to master in order to complete high school, but it doesn't count for anything.
There's
It
other
makes no
tests that
sense.
do that. This one's pointless.
And what we find for our schools is they give like benchmark assessments on the standards, and students do very well on those because they count for their grades.
So when I look at this and I get into the middle school and the high school arenas, these are basically, from the vernacular I've heard used, an end of course test, like a final, if you will.
Yes, they are.
Do these end of course tests align with current state curriculum, or are they a step past what the student should be learning? Are they really a benchmark point? Because I don't see a lot of districts up here highly proficient with large amount of students, and they're not reflective of the letter grade. So, I mean, is this literally a corollary, or do we just have a bunch of lazy students?
I will let anybody pipe in who knows more than I on this, but my understanding is that these are supposed to be criterion reference tests. So they are supposed to directly test the standards that the state adopted for that grade level and content area.
We as teachers got together and reviewed questions through AIR, which is the company that created the AZ Merit, and the standards, and we had to sit, was that about 2 days? I think it was 2 days. We sat and reviewed every question in their bank to every standard for that grade level to make sure that they mirrored each other, that they were using the same vocabulary, the same level of expectation was set. So, and every grade level did that. So, algebra or geometry had algebra and geometry teachers in there correlating those two things together.
And at the elementary level, there were standards that were not grade level, and we called to the state about it that were a little advanced, out of grade level standards, and they said it could be up to, if I remember right, 10 to 15% of the test could be this. And the state, what they told us was at that point in time at the elementary, they did not score them as the regular test. They scored them as the career and college readiness and how they did on them. And then they gave those kids some extra questions at the end. So it's really weird how it all comes together because it doesn't make any sense.
And I think typically what happens on these assessments, and I'm speaking from experience obviously in another state, but as they're doing these standards-based assessments, they're always testing questions. So there's a percentage of questions on the test that are always not scored because they're being tested for future, or they're being validated.
But they bring this back to the public in the form of a letter grade, and they say, by the way, this is how well your school is performing. And it really, as you start getting into the details of this, it's not a letter grade from what I'm seeing that is any reflection on how the school is performing.
And again, and there are parents in the room who were at our comprehensive needs assessment, we know we have areas to improve. Nobody's talking that there's not areas to improve. The performance of our school, in my opinion, is not reflected by the grades that we were given.
Yeah, because the transparency and the intent is there. The F is,
yeah,
that's just not.
Yes, sir.
I speak from 8th grade English that when we look into many of the standards that are being taught, there's a much larger selection of standards that are being taught than are being assessed on the test. For example, many of our standards are broken down into subsections like A, B, C, D, E, and F. And often only portions of those standards are being taught, are being assessed, but we're teaching all of them for college and career readiness. Another example is some of the ambiguity in the standards that are being assessed. Like our language standard is currently listed under the standards as being assessed at 0 to 13%. Now, I don't think that they quite have figured out how to get 13% of the assessment in there on a listening standard. So we're not really being assessed on stuff we're spending time teaching in terms of getting them ready for college and career.
But don't you also think that if it's the state level that's deciding what questions will or will not be included and what standards and what assessments will and will not be there, you have no way of being able to have that a fair fight, a fair assessment.
But it was teachers that decided the questions.
Well,
from all over the state.
Yeah.
I went
That
down.
decided the questions?
We went through the bank of questions and we threw out the ones we did not feel were appropriate. Yes, we set.
For air?
Mm-hmm.
Well then, okay, so then I went down at a different time, probably after you did, and I worked for 2 days. I was mostly interested in math. I wanted to know how they did this. This is a very important question.
Mm-hmm.
And the last activity that we did was for middle school math, and I sat there with 3 middle school teachers and the testing person from Austin, and he said, here's some questions that only 1 to 3% of students got right last year. We want your opinion as to whether they are legitimate or not. I couldn't believe the questions. One of the teachers, a wonderful person, I'm sure. She teaches at a gifted charter school in Phoenix. The other 2 were just regular middle school math teachers, not working with gifted kids. And they must have been intimidated by her because she said, oh, my kids can get them. Every one of those questions was thrown back into the test, and I believe that will be for next year's test. So there was another level.
Well, and those could have been those sample questions that they threw out, which is why they came back with that small percentage, and then they reviewed them to see if they're actually validated. So if no one speaks up and says, no, this is not valid, then yeah, they're going to throw them back in there.
And they did, but John's question is very valid because it's criterion reference, 6th grade math, this 6th grade math. It's not like the old, remember those of you who took the Iowa Basic and the California Achievement Test, there was a wide scale. You could be right on grade level. But there were more questions that showed that, oh, you were really working, you were 6th grade, you were working 7th grade or 8th grade. That's legitimate. But they don't seem to be, it's not scaled that way.
It is. We went back the following summer after we did the 2015. Another group of teachers got together. We looked at the scores for every grade level and every section, and we set the scales of where minimally proficient would be, where proficient would fall, and we looked at the percentage of how everyone did on those questions for that standard.
We're going to have to live with what we've got. And I agree with you, we have places we have to improve. But I'll tell for parents that don't know, I've been in 4 different states. And most states say you are at 8th grade level or you aren't. There's none of this subgroups give you extra points. And I mean, this formula is absurd. It just doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't tell you the status of that student.
And what about when it changes every year? When the standard's constantly changing? When I go have a parent-teacher meeting with my kindergarten teacher and she says, well, they have to know 20 sight words, but now they have to know how to spell 40. That's absurd. That doesn't make any sense. You got to flip that around.
And then what we're basically told is, of course, in kindergarten they're not assessed, so they're assessed in 3rd grade.
Yeah, but using that as an example, it constantly changes. So if your standards are going to constantly change for each grade, why are you going to have an accountability test? Who are you holding accountable?
And the questions are different each year.
Right.
Also,
Yeah.
it's not the same test, so that's
It's truly not comparable in that respect. We do have students who get 100% on our tests, however. They actually get every question right. So if they, that happens more often than you would think. But the other thing is, for example, our standards are changing, and I think in our next meeting, Mr. Gardner is going to give a brief update on the changes in the standards. So we know those will be assessed in 18-19. So we're given a year to change so that we can build that.
It's a moving target. We're not ever going to hit it.
Because it's not really meant to help.
Right.
It's meant to hurt and control and...
Well, it's not informing.
It's not informing teaching, right. It's penalizing the teachers, the students, the budgets. It's a high-stakes test, and... Yes.
So should I transition?
Sure. I mean, unless anybody else wants to...
Questions or comments?
Okay.
So I would like to share, because we have something unusual tonight. We have our board president who's going to give a presentation. And this came out of a conversation that we had in a couple of areas. One is on this concern about the assessments and the grades and so forth, but also as a result of Mrs. Cohen and I having a conversation about her concern about people not understanding why in some cases she voted the way she did, and thinking that it might be personal, when in fact it was based on her beliefs that she feels very, very powerful about, that are very powerful in her mind. And so my suggestion to her was, why don't you actually just do a presentation so that people understand where is it that you're coming from as you're viewing this or making comments to the paper or however it could happen that get quoted. And so she agreed to do that this evening.
And I've never used this, so I don't know how to move it forward.
Well, you can see from me it wasn't working very well. But
I hope it's not going to go on auto like hers, is it? Is there a pause button?
That's built into the valve.
Yeah.
So I think to advancing is right, backwards is left, and then if you want to use the pointy, it's the right.
Okay. All right. So sorry it took so long to get through all of our presentations. We've got just one more. And thank you for the people who I've never seen here before. It's nice to see new people at the board meeting. So tonight, this is my agenda. It's really just an introduction for future conversations. I just inquired yesterday, and we don't have an answer yet, but I would like to have a monthly town hall, maybe after our school board meetings, where we can just sit and talk about philosophy, because our school board meetings are caught up with just management and business, and we're not ever able to talk about what we think is best for our kids. So, and I've got some concerns, and I think that our kids, our culture, our community, and our country, there's something lacking there. So I'm going to cover that. and some facts about Arizona education and the funding, and then there's some sources, additional sources at the end. So this is what I think is fundamentally missing from our society. This profound statement in our declaration that I don't think that we're being taught at a young enough age, and I don't think that we're passing that on to our kids. And just based on what I see in our community, I think people are struggling. So I just want to go through this because this is so important to me. We hold these truths being eternal truths, to be self-evident, meaning so true, so easy, so basic that everyone understands them, that all men, inherent and applicable to all humans of every nation, religion, race, and ethnicity for all time, are created equal, recognizing that we were all created in the image of God, that they are endowed by their that they are endowed, meaning irrevocable, and doesn't require a defense, no debate, for all time. Excuse me. By their creator, meaning there is a creator, laws of nature and nature's God, with certain unalienable, meaning they can never be changed, ever, or taken away, rights, referring to liberty. This is important to recognize. Whether or not you believe in a creator, it's important to recognize that our rights do not come from men. They come from God, and that's why they can't be taken away. So it's really important when we're talking about rights that we know where they come from. That among, meaning there's more than these three listed, the rest can be found in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, but among these are life, liberty, freedom from restraint, meaning free will, and pursuit of happiness, which originally was property. And thank you for pointing that out to me, Grumpy. They changed this at the last minute because they were worried that the South would consider slaves their property. So in an effort to make sure that the slaves were going to be freed, they changed it to pursuit of happiness, to protect the future release of slaves. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, meaning this is the only reason that our states created our federal government, created the federal government, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, meaning all of us in this room need to consent to what they're doing, and I do not consent at all. So, with that being said, these are my major concerns. I've had so many people contact me. Members of my own family, good friends of mine who have kids, and this is what our kids are facing. And it's frightening. And we are so worried with how we are going to grade a test that is not designed to help educate whatsoever. It's designed to control. It's designed to control the teachers and the students and what they learn, so that they do not learn about what government's position is supposed to be. And that's why we are getting all these mandates from the states, from the state, from the feds, and our state. And meanwhile, all this is going on with our kids. And this alone is a conversation that I know that we desperately need to have in our community, because it's beyond critical. So I won't read through it because everybody can see that. As far as our community, and again, our kids, our community, we're missing truth, the truth of our unalienable rights. Our neighbors are in crisis. We see it all the time. I mean, I can't go on Facebook without seeing somebody who has had something devastating happen to their family and is reaching out for help here in Havasu. We see it in the papers. We just saw it in Vegas. I mean, it's this constant crisis situation for our neighbors. And our community is changed so much because we're all in our phones, we're all on Facebook, we're not, you know, we're not talking to our neighbors anymore, we're not sitting on our front porch anymore, you know, talking to people as they walk by. We're very isolated. And so I wanted to highlight that the Webster's Dictionary from 1828 and 2017, this is just an example of our rights, even in print. Just the word is disappearing, because it used to be we were a society of people having common rights and privileges. But you don't see that anymore in the dictionary. And I just wanted to highlight that because it's really important. And then this slide I want to explain. Our Constitution was set up that all these spheres operated independently. No sphere or the laws of any of these spheres were supposed to interfere with each other. They all operate independently. That is God's law. That is how our Constitution was set up. That is how our country started. And we have lost that because that state has taken over everything. And I just want to also make a point, this separation of church and state that we heard of is crap. And I just have to say it that way because it was taken so out of context from one of Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist Church, assuring them that you don't need to worry about the state interfering with your church because there's this perceived wall of separation. But it was never intended, there's never anywhere in any of our founding documents that would suggest that this separation of church and state means take God out of the public square, because I feel like that's why our society is in crisis, because we have taken those morals, those values out of our public square and prevented anybody from talking about it. So this is really important to me to point out, and I just wanted a visual there to understand the state is supposed to be the state, and that's it. They're not supposed to tell us how to raise our families. They're not supposed to tell us about the free market. They're not supposed to be there to create jobs and to promote economies, and that's not their job. But that's what they do. And I just wanted to make that very clear. So when it comes to our country and our elected officials, this is what I see as our fundamental problem. Our elected officials in every state, in our federal government, they don't understand natural law and God's law, which I just went over with the sovereign spheres. They don't understand the genealogy of our Constitution, because if they did, they would understand that this death tax that we're debating right now in Congress was settled in 1100 with the Charters of Liberties. So this is why it's so important for us to learn our history, and we should be teaching it in depth in our schools. But there's no time for that because we're testing. We get a little bit here, we get a little bit there. There's no continuity to the story, so it's hard to comprehend, and you can't shove it all in a semester in high school. You just can't do that. Organic U.S. law. This is important to understand that this, if we don't have elected officials that understand this, we don't have elected officials that are governing, they're ruling. And that's what they're doing. They're ruling and they're controlling us. So our culture has replaced God with moral relativism, liberty with tyranny, truth with tolerance, not really, e pluribus unum with diversity programs. Our republic is referred to as a democracy every time you turn around, and education with schooling, government control of our schools, which is why nobody talks about these things in school or is afraid to discuss them at school board meetings, because we've been indoctrinated for so long And people are frightened to open their mouth about it, even when they believe it. I can't tell you how many people that work for this district that I've had private conversations with that agree with everything I'm talking about right now, but they're afraid to talk about it in public because we've been conditioned. So now, so if we knew our history, and our elected officials knew our history, then they would understand state sovereignty, and they would have fought to maintain control of our lands, because in the 1912 Enabling Act, we were guaranteed. It was an act by Congress. It was declared, proclaimed, ratified, and accepted that Arizona was entitled admission into the Union on an equal footing with the original states. This is not an equal footing. This is what represents federally controlled land in red in the map on the left. And this pie chart on the right represents how much private land we have in our so-called sovereign state. It's not sovereign. Not until we get back our federal land will we be sovereign. So our tax base is based off of that 17.6% and a little bit of state trust money, which they completely, in my opinion, messed up with Prop 123, but that's a topic for another time.
Yeah.
But what's important here is there's no more money. There's not going to be any more money. Our community and our staff need to understand there's no money. And this is why. You can see we do not have, first of all, the property tax base that the rest of the, the Midwest and the Eastern states have. We don't have that. And then in addition to not having that, these are our rankings, and we are number 11 in population under 18. So that's huge. And then we are number 12 in population over 65. Well, most of the other states don't have that problem. So we hear about this number 49 ranking all the time. We don't hear we're 49th in population between 18 and 64 though. That's not the ranking that we hear about, but that represents our income tax base. So that is really small. So you combine that engine that is our income tax base with the lack of property that we have for a tax base, you can see we are in big trouble in this state. And but we do hear about this last one, 49 per pupil spending. But this ranking makes sense now. I'm hoping it makes sense, at least to the people who've been following this in the room for so long. Because of course we're ranked 49th. We don't have the property and we don't have the working tax base. So of course we're going to be last. We're going to be last for a really long time. I mean, until we have some elected officials down in Phoenix that truly take seriously their oath of office and understand our Constitution, we're going to be in this situation. So I really want this slide to hopefully convince everybody to change the topic from we're underfunded, we need more money, the state's underfunding us, because what we're doing is we are wasting our local political capital by beating that drum anymore, because it's not going to change, it's never going to change, and frankly, people are tired of hearing it. They are. They don't want to hear that anymore, especially in light of passing our bond, passing our override, all the, generous givings to our school district, and they don't want to hear that we're underfunded anymore. At a minimum, we need to explain to them why we are where we are. But I think what we need to do instead is start pounding all of our legislators about reducing regulation, getting rid of the regulation. Because if we start going through the Arizona revised statutes and we start eliminating all those mandates that they are not funding. I mean, for example, this AZ Merit, this computerized testing, where was all of our technology money? We had to go to our people to pass a bond so that we could secure our networks and start buying equipment so we could test for the state, so they could tell us how crappy we're doing as a school district. I mean, it's really insane. So this is just to highlight our funding here, where our funds come from. So our local property taxes, that's what predominantly funds our schools. And this is our community who we know now does in fact support education, does support our teachers, cares about our kids. And you know, I would love nothing more than to get our M&O budget down to 67% so that we could just tell the state and the federal government that we just don't need their help anymore. That would be my ideal goal, but this highlights where we're at with our funding. Education. So AZ Merit and A through Fs, they don't measure excellence in education, in my opinion, at all whatsoever. It's not the purpose. That is not the purpose, because if our AZ Merit is not measuring what our children know about our Declaration and Constitution, in my opinion, or our history, they're not measuring excellence. So this is why I think the AZ Merit and the A through F grades are a complete fraud perpetrated on public education. And I love this quote by Winston Churchill, "I shall be satisfied with the very best," and that's how I feel. I want the best for our teachers, and I want the best for our kids. But it's not going to come from the state, and it's not going to come from the federal government, and it's not going to come from standards that are created by an unelected, unaccountable state board of ed that is appointed by a governor for a political tool. I mean, it's insane. This is never going to change. And I synthesized this last piece from a bunch of different documents that all come from Hillsdale College. Education is a moral enterprise with the original intent to transfer knowledge and prepare our minds with cultural, moral, and civic literacy in order to be productive and joyful citizens who can preserve our republic. And we are doing no such thing in education. Our Arizona Constitution still states, "We the people of the state of Arizona, grateful to Almighty God for our liberties, do ordain this Constitution." Isn't it ironic that we're not allowed to talk about it in our schools? Article 11, Section 7 includes, "But the liberty of conscience hereby secured shall not be so construed as to justify practices or conduct inconsistent with the good order, peace, morality, or safety of the state, or with the rights of others." And I feel like our legislators and our governor and, well, that's all in our state, violate this article and this section every single day. Our governor, when the standards were being reviewed, said, quote, "We can learn from others, but at the end of the day, the standards need to come from Arizona and they need to help us achieve our objectives." I would like to know what those objectives are, because I don't think they're excellence in education. I think it's about money and control. And then I don't need to highlight the state legislature, you just need to look through Title 15 and see how long it is. It's exhaustively long with all the laws. And our State Board of Education's stated mission on their website is to aggressively set policies that foster excellence in public education. And I say that because there's a difference between excellence in education and excellence in public education. And this is the reason that my grandmother purchased, my grandmother, who was a 6th grade school teacher for 30 years, who purchased this book so that I could give it to all the staff, because not just teachers need to know this. I mean, our whole community needs to understand how we got to where we are in education. And this book, Passion Driven Education, the foreword that's written by John Taylor Gatto, so succinctly and almost horrifically explains where it came from, where our model of education came from. It is not unique to this country. And within that foreword, it points out education is quite different in the elite schools around the country. And I'm not talking charter schools. Charter schools, you know, they get to do some of their own things that we can't do. They have different rules than we do. But the elite private schools of this country, Sidwell Friends is one of them. I don't know if anybody recognizes the name, but that's the one that all the president's children have gone to throughout history, from, you know, the start of our country. And I guarantee you they're not dealing with any of this. They are learning the classical history of the world. I mean, they are the ones that are going to be making the decisions for all of us. They get an education different from what we get to give our kids. And it doesn't make sense, because I can't be the only one that thinks all of our kids deserve that education. And it's really easy to provide that type of education if you're not distracted with all the mandates that are coming from the state and all the control. So I just want to thank my grandma, because I know she'll watch this video when it's up. I love you. For purchasing the book, and for any staff members that are here that didn't get their book already, we've got them behind Terry, and if you would just sign the sheet that you picked one up, and then I'll be delivering the rest to the schools. And then my last slide is just a couple of links, because we're going to post this, right? Just a couple of links, and I won't read through them, but the top one I will just let you know I came across by accident, and it's just the most astounding thing. I stayed up an entire night reading it because I couldn't believe what I was reading. This was, it was done at NAU, and it reads like a novel, and it is the history of the superintendent of public instruction in Arizona from territory through 1974. And you will see the same argument, the same superintendent fighting the governor, fighting the State Board of Ed. You will see this same fight with the same concerns about teacher pay and too much control from the beginning. And it's pretty amazing. And then I do want to point out one more thing, just as I'm thinking of it before I stop, because it's late already. You know, when I did my research, I was researching education, and I went back to 1647, and I could determine that was the first public school in our country. It was in Massachusetts. It was before, you know, we were a country, but it was a colonial school, and it was enacted, or it was formed because of the 1647 Old Deluder Satan Act. And they passed this act saying if you have more than 50 households, you needed to pay a public school teacher to teach your children to read the Bible. And so I thought, wow, that's fantastic. Until I found out also through this passion-driven education forward that our first commissioner, our first U.S. Commissioner of Education in 1906 wrote, the philosophy of education is to, quote, divorce children from their nature, their parents, their religion, and their culture. And that's what we've done. Sorry, that's it. That's disturbing. And most people alive today have been in that system since they were children, and they don't know. So it's incumbent on us to do our research and know what we're doing. Okay. We have a meeting to do. That's it.
That's Carol's turn.
No, Carol's going to take a pass tonight. Or unless you have something. Okay.
Taking a pass.
Okay. She asked to take a pass. I wasn't telling her to. Love her updates, but...
Take the 8.
Okay. Do I have a motion? I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved. Seconded.
Terry?
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Alan Ward,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Okay, 5 old business, 5.1, second presentation review of revised policies. Mrs. Asire. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. As we noted at our last meeting, this is the second reading of several board policies that are recommended revisions from ASBA. We do have a new format for our policies, and that is a listing of all of the ones that have technical changes with additional page numbers added. So there are several policies listed here, and the recommendation of staff is that the board approve these policies as presented. There have been no changes since the first reading.
I move we approve 5.1 as presented. Second.
John Maston,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
Alan Ward,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes.
Thank you. Section 5.2, also old business. This is the second reading of our new policy EIC and Exhibit EIC-E regarding self-insurance programs for the Employee Benefit Trust. This exhibit outlines the procedures to fill vacancies on the EBT board and provides an exhibit that will be the paperwork that would be used when there are vacancies on the board which need to be filled. Again, there have been no changes in this policy since the first reading on September 12th.
Do I have a motion to approve 5.2?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Alan Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. 6.1, new business, approval of license and service agreement with Tyler Technologies. Mr. Murray.
Madam President, members of the board, it's recommended that the governing board approve a license and services agreement between Tyler Technologies and Lake Havasu Unified School District at an amount not to exceed $350,000, which will be paid from bond and district additional assistance funds. Tyler Technologies provided the district with an agreement to license financial software products and perform professional services, which include project management, training, benefits enrollment implementation, consulting, data import, and software installation. The expenses of purchasing the software and utilizing their professional services are one-time fees associated with initial setup and transitioning supports. Recurring fees will occur each year as part of continued management system services and software supports. Recurring fees are anticipated at approximately $65,000 to $75,000 per year. The purchase will take place through the Mojave Cooperative, and the voters have approved an expenditure of $130,000 towards the software out of bond funds, and an approval amount of $350,000 is being requested to cover the one-time setup fees, first year's recurring costs, and any technology, equipment, or software needed to support on-site hosting in the future. This item has been reviewed by purchasing and legal.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve 6.1?
So moved.
Second.
I also have Kim Valentine here from Tyler Technologies, should anybody have any questions.
What are we paying currently for our accounting software package here? What's our maintenance fees?
Our annual fee is right about $179,000 per year.
So this is going to save us about $100,000 a year just in that alone?
Correct. Once we get through the initial setup, yes, in year 2 to 3, we will be saving some money.
And there was a letter from a company we hired today that you had sent out, the forensic audit firm, that recommended that we go to this specific system.
Correct.
And that would help us to reconcile our books with the county.
Correct. In November, we will bring that to the board, that letter, and actually review it, but you're correct. There was a recommendation through the consulting firm who actually performed phase 1 of the forensic audit, and that was one of their recommendations to move to this system because the vast majority of the state utilizes this system.
Okay, and last question, are we doing this in-house, or are we going to host this in the cloud?
Per initial conversations and follow-up conversations, there are a few different options. We currently are looking to have Tyler host this just during the transition phase of actually moving from our current system to the new system, and then looking at us actually hosting it on site after probably within about 8 months' time or so. We're looking at right around September in that area to make that transition.
And I'm going to assume that that was due to the ongoing server project that we have.
Correct. That is correct.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Alan Ward,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Baston,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Thank you for traveling all the way here. I don't know where she,
She came all the way. She came all the way to from
Thank you for
Phoenix.
traveling. Sorry you had to sit through such a long meeting.
We look forward to the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, 6.2, approval of the 2017-18 revised budget. Mr. Murray.
Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended that the governing board approve revision number 1 to the 2017-18 adopted budget as presented.
Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any questions? Hearing.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Alan Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Baston,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Okay, 6.3, approval of Safe Harbor Pupfish Certificate of Inclusion for Schoolyard Habitat at Lake Havasu High School. Mr. Becker.
Yes. Madam President, members of the board, it is
Could you turn the microphone so it faces you?
He's not used to having one.
No, that's okay. It'll pick up more of his voice.
Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended that the governing board, hopefully the phone's not working right, that the governing board approve the stocking of the desert pupfish in the schoolyard habitat at Lake Havasu High School under the Safe Harbor Agreement with Arizona Game and Fish and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. And the document has been reviewed by our legal and approved as well.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve 6.3. I'll second it.
Any questions?
I've got a question. I always have a question. What's the long-term educational benefit of this? I mean, I know we're going to put the pupfish in there, and that initially it'll gather all kinds of attention. But is this already programmed into the curriculum for long-term benefit?
And this is why I brought my science department chair with me, because without her and her husband doing all of the work in that yard area and doing all the paperwork and the spending the time, we would not even have it on our campus.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I want to make sure we don't have a nice to see thing that over time simply becomes a big mud puddle.
So this has been a grant that I've been working on. It got approved 2 years ago and it closes May of 2018. And I've been working along with the science department. Part of my grant is I have to, by the end, have lessons in place where it will be used in our curriculum. So I've been working alongside, especially Ms. Krosky with ecology. She's going to be doing water sampling and doing fish counts because this is an endangered species that we're stocking. It's going to be a rehabilitation pond. So as they do reproduce and the population increases, we will be reintroducing them into their native habitat in Arizona. So it is something that will be with our curriculum. It's not just I take my kids out there and work. Math will go out there. They can art and still lifes. So it's something that every curriculum can use. Right now it's not 100% embedded in, but in science it will be for the longevity of the habitat.
The only thing I'd add to that is if for some reason, because this is an endangered species, you find that it isn't being facilitated, I would hope you would bail out of it quickly.
And that's where we're working right alongside with Game and Fish and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So they will be coming in and monitoring. And if at any time they think it's not something that should be there, we can terminate the Safe Harbor Agreement early. Yes.
Go ahead, Pat.
And then when they come in, they'll probably talk to the kids that are involved in this, right? The people that you're that you're doing this with, the
Fish and Wildlife.
yeah. And I think this is a great idea because it makes education relevant, and they can see something like this going on, and if it's reinforced by people coming in, and you guys are monitoring it, I mean, it just it makes science right in front of it. And I think it's a real good idea.
And it suggests careers that students who are interested in this can go into and talk to real professionals, which is very valuable.
I don't see a huge downside in the classroom to this, but I have to ask. While the pupfish is a very acclimatized species for a wide variety of climates, in the middle of summer in Lake Havasu, who's taking care of the fish? That's all you.
We didn't even put irrigation in. I am there every week. I hand water every plant that's in there. I feed the tortoises 2 to 3 times a week while I'm there multiple times all day long.
It's in the same area as the
Yep.
tortoise? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the
it's a
two
big
desert
pond.
tortoise are in there.
Yeah, well, I've seen
The ribbon
that.
head in there.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're not going to have a bowl of fish soup in the middle
No,
of summer.
I am there.
That's basically what I'm concerned with. I don't want you to misunderstand. I understand this is great educational benefit. I just want to make sure we don't wind up with a situation that deteriorates.
Exactly.
Pupfish oftentimes are located in areas that are very warm. In fact, oftentimes they're fed by springs that come out from the desert and that are real warm. So, you know, that's one of the things I was looking at, because that water, unless it's circulated, is going to get real hot. And I don't know what their parameters are, but whoever you're working with probably realizes that, hey, you know, they know what the parameters are as far as the water temperature.
I'm actually working with Ross Timmons, who is Arizona Game and Fish. He is the pupfish organizer. This is his job. It's his project.
Yeah, pupfish professional.
Are there any future plans or even a thought in your mind about anything having to do with aquaponics?
I actually did aquaponics in my classroom for 2 years. It just became too much. We can't do it in the habitat because everything has to be native, but we do have the capability of a small aquaponics tank. I had it set up with goldfish and I did some vegetables in my classroom.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I'll call for the vote.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yeah.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. 6.4,
Madam President,
approval of qualified.
Can I interrupt real quick?
I'm sorry.
Just to speed up the meeting. She has paperwork that we do have to sign, so can you not sneak off afterwards and we sign that agreement?
I never sneak off. I'm always the last one to, well, one of the last ones to leave, but yes, I will stay.
Just Mr. Becker that has to sign.
I do not, okay.
His name on it.
6.4, approval of qualified evaluators for the 2017-18 school year. Mrs. Asire.
Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended that the governing board approve the administrators listed and certified staff listed as qualified evaluators for the 17-18 school year. The above individuals have received the necessary training as required by ARS 15-537D, one of those other requirements in statute, and are delegated the authority to issue written preliminary notices of inadequacy of classroom performance. I would also mention that all of them are required to go through what we call inter-rater reliability to ensure that we are consistent in our observations when we do evaluate our staff.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve 6.4?
I make a motion to approve 6.4. I second it.
Any questions? I'll call for the vote.
John Maston?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. 6.5, approval of performance-based site-based goals for 2017-18. Mrs. Society.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended that the governing board approve the following performance pay site-based goals that are following this cover sheet for 17-18. Lake Havasu Unified and its stakeholders do have high expectations for our students, teachers, and administrators. Each year, our buildings set goals to improve student learning. Goals were identified this year as primary needs through the comprehensive needs assessment and through our process of doing our integrated action plans. The goals must include student achievement, professional development, and parent communication and involvement. Student achievement, meeting that goal is 50% of the site-based money. Professional development, meeting that goal is 25%. And parent communication, meeting that goal is 25% as well. 3 of our schools have chosen math as their goals, specifically number sense with a focus on fluency and numbers and operations skills. The remaining 5 schools have chosen English language arts goals with a focus on academic vocabulary, reading for information across content areas, and comprehension.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve 6.6?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, that's 6.5.
I'm sorry, 6.5. Any questions?
How much money are we talking about that can be attained per site?
This pertains to Fund 12 of 301, and that is without, actually, I believe it's around 900,000 or so. That's about 40% of the total 301 compensation that comes to the district.
And so the percentage by site would be determined by the number of staff.
Correct.
I would like to recommend that next year prior to this, we have a work session to go over this.
Okay.
We normally do, but I think it was because of break that
Yes.
we didn't have it.
And we can schedule a work session on a different date when break occurs. We did not do that, but
Yes. Any other questions? See, I would like to be able to put all of our student achievement the way we want it. This is just highlights. Instead of being told. Okay. Call for the vote.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. Approval, 6.6, approval of administrator performance pay plan and criteria for the 17-18 school year. Mr. Murray. Is it Mr.
No,
Murray?
that's me.
I'm sorry. Mrs. Asaya.
it would be Mrs. Minor, but she has not. She's at the actual national conference that is in Arizona this year. It is recommended that the governing board approve the attached administrative performance pay plan and Exhibit A, the criteria for 17-18. Back in 2012, the governing board approved an alternative procedure to meet the requirements of Senate Bill 1263 and ARS 15-341A40. With the alternative procedure, principals, assistant principals, directors, and the superintendent receive an equal portion of a designated sum if they meet all requirements. The breakdown for the administrator pay is 25% for academic gain, 25% for parent satisfaction, 25% for professional development, and 25% for teacher satisfaction. And this particular plan is based on, for academic gain, the 301 goals that the school set, for parent satisfaction for our district-wide parent survey, teacher satisfaction for our teacher survey, and professional development is based upon our teachers having the opportunity to observe in another teacher's classroom as a part of their professional.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve 6.6?
So moved.
Second.
Do you have any questions?
I'd like to recommend the same thing for next year.
Work session.
Do we ever get the whole survey? I mean, I see survey results that are posted, but I don't see the questions.
We usually post it, I'll double check to make sure that the results and the questions are there, and the results are part. So you can see the question up above and then the pie chart with the results. been our yearly thing that we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no questions, I'll call for the vote.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Baston,
Yes.
Scott Rooney,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. 6.7, approval of land exchange. Mr. Murray.
Madam President, members of the board, the governing board is asked to approve the potential exchange of land between the Lake Havasu Unified School District and Mr. Mayor Akhtarzad, and to authorize an appraisal of both properties, the cost of which will be the responsibility of Mr. Mayor. The Lake Havasu Unified School District, number one, has received a request for an exchange of land. The district currently owns parcels 108-12-141, and Mr. Mayor owns parcels 139, 140, and 144, which was recently purchased and closed in August. So he now owns 3 parcels there on Swanson. A printout showing the location of the lots is attached to this agenda action item. The district may exchange unimproved property where the governing board determines that the property is unnecessary for the continued operation of the school district without requesting authorization by a vote of the school district electors. If the governing board determines that the exchange is necessary to protect the health, safety, or welfare of pupils, or when the governing board determines that the exchange is based on sound business principles. The exchange may be for unimproved or improved property of equal or greater value, or unimproved property that the owner contracts to improve, if the value of the property ultimately received by the district is of equal or greater value. The exchange would occur after an appraisal for which Mr. Akhtarzad will be responsible, only if the district's property is of equal or lesser value than the other parcel, or improvements are made to increase the value obtained by the district when the exchange take place. A resolution for land exchange must be signed by all board members present at the board meeting at which the land exchange is approved. The resolution will authorize the board president to sign the land exchange agreement, and the resolution will also direct the district to record the deed. Per the resolution, the governing board president will be authorized to sign the deed at a later date. I believe Amber Hoffman is here. She's the realtor representing Mr. Akhtarzad, so if there's any questions, we can direct that her way as well.
Thank you. Do you have a motion to approve 6.7?
I make a motion to approve 6.7.
Do you have a second?
At this point, this is just an authorization to consider Mr. Akhtarzad going out and actually paying for an appraisal to even just determine what the values of the properties are at this time. It's not a motion to actually accept and authorize the swap, but it's just to initiate whether or not we want him to proceed and spend money.
If I can say something that would...
Until we put it on the floor.
Excuse me?
I'll second it to put it on the floor.
Okay.
But I have a lot of concerns and questions about this.
Okay, now we're in discussions.
Okay, I'm sorry I'm not tall as the other gentleman. I actually have to step on my tippy toes to reach this. I'm Amber Hoffman. I am Mr. Mayor's realtor, and his goal of what we're up to is we're trying to buy out a lot of the property on Swanson. We are doing a commercial building down underneath, and we want to do residential on the top, which we've been approved through the county now that they changed the zoning. We can go up to 62 foot if we want to, but I don't think we're going to go up that high. Due to the fact that we did some research on this, ASU had a lot of applicants last year, and the problem why those students did not attend the school was due to the lack of dorm room, apartment, or condo space for these kids. So that's why he wants to do this. He wants to kind of make it a little bit like the downtown of the Tempe area, where like we have, you know, little sub shops and things on the bottom, and then the condo units on the top. So therefore, we can get more kids down here to actually attend our school district for ASU. So I'm actually in front of you guys seeking permission if we can move forward to go ahead and start with appraisal on this, and hopefully you guys will honor the exchange for the properties.
What, I have a question. what are we doing with those properties right now, and why did we get those?
I can't speak to how we got them, but I can speak to that we have one piece of, we have one lot on Swanson a number of years ago.
And that is number what, 144?
141 is what we own.
141, okay.
Didn't we just swap that?
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's funny because he actually purchased the one you guys did swap with and stuff.
I mean, those lots are pretty narrow. What are we going to use it for?
I don't see anything in the near future that we would use it for.
This is kind of where I'm going.
I mean, what I'm saying is I know that they used to have, you know, Daytona, the old junior high was across from there, but they're deep lots, but they're small lots. And what could the district use those for? I mean, they're sitting there, right?
Yeah, there's one currently on Swanson that keeps getting shuffled around.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, I don't know, you know, how we were bequeathed it or how we got it, you don't know either, but it's just sitting there and we're not doing anything with it. So wouldn't it be better if we got money for it and put that in, I guess, the general fund or wherever it would go, rather than just let it sit there?
I would have no problem writing a contract up for this.
Well, I'm just wondering out loud, you know. Well, I'm having trouble balancing these numbers to figure out.
Where it's at?
When he talks about 139, 144, and there's blank lots in between there.
Okay, so I can help you with that, Al. That blank spot in between there is the city easement.
Is what?
City easement.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm talking 42 and 43, he doesn't even mention. Does he own 42 and 43?
No, actually 41, see 40, I call them, okay, let's do it this way, it's a little bit easier. Lot 17, if you look at the bigger number up above, we'll do off the lot portion. Lot 17 you guys own.
Right.
Lot 18 and 19 are actually owned by one gentleman that actually has a building on it, as we speak. Lot 144, which is lot 20, I'm sorry, 144 is lot 20, that's the one we want to exchange with you guys. And then also lot 21 and 22 are owned by Mojave Health. Actually, they own, I think they own 21, 22, 23, and 24, 25, and 26. So they own a good chunk of them right there because they have a lot of buildings sitting on them. So what we're planning to do is we are actually going to be going after lot 18 and 19, which is the buildings, to extend this project out as a larger span. And it's right, they are small portions, so we have to have so many of them just to be able to get the space that we need to do, and also with the parking.
19 would be the old senior center. So that's the old driveway right there in that parcel B. I own property behind where you're talking about. I have a commercial building behind there.
Is it behind lot 18 and 19? Is that what you're saying? Oh, are you on Macaulay?
I'm on
I need
Macaulay.
that one.
Okay. Okay.
I'd like to see an appraisal of what it's worth. I'm kind of with you. Why do we own this thing?
I can actually tell you what it's worth.
Oh, no. An appraiser will tell us what it's worth.
Well,
you can suggest
we do
all
the
you
same
want.
thing. No.
John, what does that property butt up against?
Which one? The lot 17?
Yeah, I mean, I can see we've got Swanson Avenue, but what's this?
That's
parking
Van
lot.
Fleet Alley. That's the alleyway back behind my building and where Lisa
Okay.
is.
I got you.
So I would say that regardless, we want to run an appraisal on this.
Absolutely. I would highly
And-
recommend you guys to do that.
And once we have an appraisal, if your client is so inclined to pay for that appraisal at this point, I think what we should be doing is we should be looking at this both ways and whatever's going to work out best for the district long-term.
If we were going to sell it, it would have to go to a vote of the public.
Yep.
In terms of being presumptuous, but one of the areas that we have an issue with here is teacher housing. And so I think another option would be to look at, in combination with that project, would there be a way for us to have some teacher housing,
Some trade-off.
a teacherage?
Well, to let you know, he's, like I said, we're going after pretty much as we possibly can on Swanson due to the fact. And the reason why he even did this research is because his son applied for ASU, but they had nowhere to put him. And so he actually wound up going to NAU. And so he didn't wind up being a student at ASU.
Well, the village don't give it to them at all.
I'm sorry. Well, they didn't have anywhere to put him, and that's why he started this project. He's like, okay, we got to get condos in here. We got to get something for these kids because they're going to just keep going somewhere else. You know, we want them here. Stuff.
Mike, is 17 the only one of these properties we own?
That's correct.
Yeah.
John, it does say on paragraph 3 down there, the exchange would occur after an appraisal, so I guess.
I think either way, we want to get the appraisal done and see what's worth.
I agree with you.
Yeah, we
So
might
if
be
we
able to
prove
sell
this tonight,
17
we're not
to John for a
approving.
driveway.
I can use the driveway.
Yeah.
But it does say, though, that an exchange would occur after the appraisal comes in and shows that it's the district's property is at least equal or lesser value. So I think that the point is if we have Mr. Mayor go out and pay for an appraisal, but then we don't act on that, he's now out of
Money for
an appraisal. We didn't follow through on the follow-up as far as...
The business guy in me says in for a penny, in for a pound, but that's the business guy. I mean, we could simply sit on it, too. At some point, it'll become much more valuable than what it's worth, especially if he wants to do the project.
Some of them were probably built around it, but yeah. It's like I said, it's either this way we try going after 17, or we're going to actually move all the way down to the bottom portion of it, because there's almost 6 of them that are completely attached all together, and it's owned by the same person. So he bought 2, then he went after the 144 to exchange with the 17, and that's the only one he's missing out of that section. And then he's going after the bigger buildings and stuff, so that, like I said, so he would like this directly across from the school is the main purpose of this. It's just so that, because they can walk and go have lunch, or come back, and then the same thing with the professors and the teachers there can do the same thing.
What's his urgency on this?
He's looking for, he's trying to get all the land purchased up in the next year, and then from there we are starting with, like I said, we've already played with the planning and zoning, we've already had some stuff moved and taken care of that portion of it, and then we're going to start on plans and start with the development portion of it.
So this is something you could say, hey, they may want to sell this, but they still want you to do that. And we could actually come back in November and agendize it as simply an appraisal with options, if we had to re-agendize something.
See, I'm hesitant with this if we're talking about trading a piece of property, because if we're not using it, and it serves us no purpose, why do we want another piece of property we're not going to use that serves us no purpose?
So that's why it came before the board tonight, because it's either we being the district, but obviously under the direction of the board, either understanding that we're going to allow him to go ahead and pay for the appraisal and then move forward with the swap if it does come in our favor, or as suggested, that we just have to sit on it and then formulate another plan as to, are we going to just try to outright sell it? If that's the case, it's going to take a little bit more time to...
I think the base question needs to be answered, what is it worth?
We can
What is
evaluate.
it worth? What is it worth?
If the lot's worth 30, it may be something we want to hold for. If it's worth 100, let's get rid of it.
And I think that they are looking at the project, we aren't. So if they want to do an appraisal and come to us and say, this is what it's worth,
right,
then we'll consider what we're going to do. But trading a piece of property for another piece of property that we're not going to use just doesn't make any sense at all.
And that's why the board would offer that direction and perhaps counsel to them to say that here are your options. If you want to go ahead and act on your own and conduct the appraisal and then come back to us with it and allow us to then at that point determine where we're going to go, then that would be on your client's own free will and choice at that point to make that decision.
Right, right. And then that's, like I said, I'm just here seeking if we can go ahead and get appraisals started and get going on what we need to do with it. And if you guys do want to sell it out, I have no hesitation on that, and I don't think he's going to have any hesitation on it either. I can tell you exactly what it's worth, but you guys, like I said, you're going to want your appraisal and stuff, and I understand that.
We have to have our appraisal.
Yeah, you have to. Legitimately, you have to have it for even do any kind of contracts on it.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't see why we couldn't move forward with this, because the recommendation is not saying that we will. That's in the rationale. The actual recommendation is just to get an appraisal.
It's to approve a potential.
But potential is key. It's not shall, and it's not the would down in the rationale. So I don't see where it would be a problem to.
So then the resolution for the land exchange would come forward at a later date.
Recommendation authorizes him to do an appraisal. Doesn't lock us into anything.
Well, it does say an exchange with our.
Or we could amend the motion.
I would amend the motion to reflect that we would move forward with an exchange or anything further until after the appraisal is reviewed by the entire board.
Would you restate that, please?
Louder into the microphone.
I would amend the motion that we would not move forward with an exchange or anything further until the entire board had a chance to review the appraisal. Was it Pat's motion?
It was.
Yes, it was.
Okay, sorry.
I'll
You concur
second.
with that? Well, no, you have.
No, I'll go along with that.
Thank you.
That makes sense to me. It doesn't, yeah, I agree with Mike. It doesn't make sense to me that, and Grumpy, to just exchange it for another piece of property we're not going to use.
And we have to also be cautious. We might want to bring legal counsel into this because if we do decide to go with the option of selling it and then it goes before the public, there may not be any guarantees that your client even comes out as the individual who would purchase it, because then it becomes open to everyone.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear that I don't want to mislead you or your client that should he put forth this money and have an appraisal done, that in no way is he being promised or implied this piece of property.
Right.
And that's just from me as the director of business services, just being perfectly clear that it would be on his own action based on the recommendation and now the amendment from the board.
So it will be on my client's on his action to get appraisal done on this piece of property for your guys' value if you decide you want to sell it.
Correct.
Or
to entertain future options.
Right.
But then knowing though that if it does become something that we go and actually try to sell this, that just opens up a whole nother avenue.
Correct.
And I just want that to be clear from me.
Would it be better to withdraw the motion and then explore that, with legal counsel before we go any place on it, ask those questions, and then you could get back with her?
I would feel much more comfortable with that.
I would too. So can I withdraw my motion?
Yes.
I'm sorry that I
The
went to
motion
the
that
meeting.
John amended. Do you have to withdraw your amendment to the motion of the?
His
We're
amendment
not
was not real.
It was never seconded.
No, it wasn't seconded.
It wasn't,
No,
correct?
it wasn't.
See,
I did.
that's what
All right, so then we'll go ahead and vote.
Can I have a second to withdraw the motion?
Second.
Cross out all this stuff?
So now we're back to the original motion, and we are either going to vote yes to proceed or no to not proceed.
Let's call it.
Okay,
Okay.
I call for the vote.
Kathy Cox?
No.
John Maston?
No.
Pat Rooney?
No.
Ellen Ward?
No.
Nicole Combs?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch too.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, 6.8, approval of vouchers and student activity funds and auxiliary funds. Mr. Murray.
Madam President, members of the board, it's recommended that the governing board approve the vouchers for September 2017, as well as the K-8 student activity funds for August and student activity funds for grades 9 through 12 for August 2017, as well as auxiliary funds for August 2017.
Do I have a motion to approve 6.8?
I'll move it.
Second.
Any questions?
I'd like to thank Mr. Murray because rather than beat him about the math class being upside down, he did bring me an actual balance sheet that showed that the math class is finally balanced. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker, for helping us with it.
And is that spreadsheet, which I didn't print, is that what you're going to be forwarding now monthly? Because that's fantastic. Does that answer your questions?
Rather than print this up, because this is actually short, this is 15 pages,
Right.
because sometimes they're in the
Yeah.
20s and 30s, so
Right.
if you're fine getting it electronically, that would be
I
great.
came close to hitting print and I looked at it, I'm like, oh, 15 pages, no.
That's just a lot of paper when we add it to this, so, but we can do it if you would rather that be the case.
It's fine, just make sure it's not locked up and I can change the color to grayscale so I don't suck up all my ink. Okay. We are in the informational section. Mrs. Assayers?
Do we have a vote on
You have to
that?
vote.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion for 6.8? Do I have the motion in a
Yes, we have a
second?
motion.
It's on the
Second.
table.
Call for the vote, sorry.
John Maston?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Ellen Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. Informational, Mrs. Assayer.
Thank you. I, as always, thank our community for the support, which is ongoing, and our donations as to date is $100,000 that has been donated for the school year in money and in kind, and this month was $21,658. So we appreciate that support in all of our classrooms. I would like to remind everybody that starting on November 14th, our work sessions will start at 4 o'clock. So we did move those back by 1 hour from 5 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And again, November 14th is our next work session. And then while it's on the agenda for future agenda items, we would like to bring back an update for the board on the changes in the Arizona standards for our next meeting.
Okay, does anybody have any questions with the director's reports? Thank you very much. I love these director reports at the end. They're fantastic. Any reports from the governing board members?
I would like to make a comment, Nicole. You had a captive audience here tonight, and I think it was sort of inappropriate for, our focus should be on good schools. I noticed that when I read things that our elected representatives get elected, and they always go down and promise that they're going to cut taxes. But when you keep cutting taxes, it starts affecting services. And when you tell corporations that you're going to give them big tax breaks, it's going to cut services. And then when you have the people that you elect go down there and they vote for ESAs and stuff like that, and when you have state legislators moving and saying we want a voucher system, and you're sucking all of this out of public school money, but you're talking to the choir here. And so when people elect people, they need to be a little more discerning and ask those questions that are rather pointed on what their position is. And that's just the way I feel. And I don't need, I don't mean to offend you, but I don't need a civics lesson. Because I'm very conscientious, and I think most people are that way that are here in our country. We're conscientious. We want the best. And we want the best in our communities and whatever. But the people that get elected, if you want to if you want to start asking direct questions or get some type of results, then those are the people that have to be held accountable. And that's just the way I feel. You know, we've produced a lot of kids out of this town. They understand their responsibilities as citizens. They go out and do a great job. And so I think the teachers get across a real good idea what the responsibilities of citizenship are. And, you know, but when you have a society that, I just look, I was talking to my wife, I says, you know, you can tell where society's going when you see an erosion of language, the language that is used every day and the language that's used in entertainment, and now it's on TV. You can tell where society's going when you don't have standards, when the people that make the movies and the entertainment, they use this as artistic license and all those type of things. So I think there are a lot of Americans that they want the best, and I don't see it as doomsday. I just see that sometimes the people that we elect aren't listening to us real well. But they will listen to us if you write them letters and if you hold them accountable when they come in for town hall meetings, not a group like this.
Well, I do hold all of our elected officials accountable, and I communicate with them pretty regularly, and but I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Anybody else have comments?
But you're doing a good job, so don't go into counseling now that I brought you.
I do have something else related to tonight's agenda. I had intended on the consent calendar to ask a couple of questions under the organization of instruction, and I neglected to do that until my opportunity was over, so I just would like to make a comment. This statement, the district may offer vocational education programs beyond secondary education to adult students who have either graduated from high school or obtained a general education diploma. Did this statement come from Arizona School Boards Association, or was there someone in the district that wanted this put?
Well, I'm sure it was put in there because that is part of state law.
Okay, but
so
can our district not refuse that, the problems that would cause to have 19 and 20 and 21-year-old students coming onto the campus for both ed classes?
The way I understood that was written to facilitate if the school wanted to have a vocational program, let's say in the evening, they have the option of opening it to adult education.
Okay, but we would, as a board, we would have to approve it, and that's what I want to know. I have no objection, but I want to make absolutely certain that we would have to approve it before it happens. Okay, that's all I want to know. And then I want to thank Calvary Baptist Church, and I think there were a couple of other churches that ended up helping as well, and all of the volunteers who showed up at the schools, and all of the custodians who came in over the weekend and cleaned up their schools after all of that. But anyway, another big thank you to our community.
Okay, advisory committees, we've got down there, but we haven't convened them yet. We are going to do that at our next meeting, are we not? Okay. I too want to thank all the churches, Calvary in particular. I think I think they're the ones that started the idea, and it was a good time, and it was nice to work with my
First annual, I'm sure they have something planned for.
I think it'll be amazing.
All I ask is don't catch our pastor in the middle of something and say, we have 47 more rooms that need to be used.
I do want to mention in conjunction with that the person who organized that event and who spoke here to the public that night is Amber
Smith
Garrison, who was a former Oro Grande student for many years, and I was her principal. And so I was just really proud that was one of our former outstanding students who organize such a big event like that.
She was.
Are there any calls to public? No, there are not. Thank you. Any questions from the meeting? Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Scott Rooney?
Yeah.
Jonathan Madison?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.